The central building block of mobile applications in Alpha 5 are panels, panel cards, panel navigators, and panel layouts. And in this video we're going to explain the concepts behind panels. So let's start by looking at a simple mobile app that was built in Alpha 5. So you can see here we're looking at this app in our mobile simulator, and when we press the first button we transition from one panel to another panel. Then in this panel we see a list of our customers. This is actually the Northwind customer database, and it's a SQL query that populates this list. And if I click on an item in the list, we transition to another panel and we show a map in that panel with the city marked on the map. And then when we click on the detail button, we transition to another panel that shows detail for that record. So you can see here we transition from the two panels, between the two panels. Now if we go back, we can click this button to bring up a search box where we could go ahead and type search criteria, and let's go back to our first panel over here. So you can see that this application is constructed by building several different panels, each which contain different UI controls, and then controlling the flow from one panel to another panel. So let's go now and talk about what the different panels are in Alpha 5 and how they are used to build an application. So the basic idea here is that mobile applications are built using panels, and there are three types of panels. There are panel cards, panel navigators, and panel layouts. And if you look at existing business mobile applications, you can easily identify how those applications are built using panels. And at the end of the presentation here, we'll take a look at an existing iPhone app, and we'll deconstruct it into these basic concepts of panel cards, panel navigators, and panel layouts. So now the panel card is the most basic of the panels, and the panel card is the card that actually contains all of the UI elements. So here's an example of a simple panel card. This panel card would have here a header and a footer, and then here are your input controls and your buttons. So all of your standard UI will be placed inside panel cards. Now obviously the simplest of apps would only contain a single panel card, but realistically your app is going to contain more than one panel card. So you need to have a way of transitioning from one panel card to another, or a way to display multiple panel cards at the same time. So the panel navigator is the next type of panel, and the panel navigator is a container for other panels. And the panel navigator allows you to transition from one panel to another panel. So the panel navigator can be set into different modes. It can be set into a carousel mode, tab button mode, or programmatic. So if you look at the image here, you can see we have a panel navigator, and inside this panel navigator we have three panel cards: panel card 1, panel card 2, and panel card 3. And then initially when the panel navigator is displayed, panel card 1 is visible, and panel card 2 and panel card 3 are not visible. But then when the user swipes from left to right on panel card 1, then panel card 2 will come into view. So you can see here that panel card 2 is now in view, and panel card 1 has been pushed out of view, and you can think of it conceptually as being to the left of panel card 2, and then panel card 3 has still not yet been brought into view. But then when the user swipes on panel card 2, then panel card 3 will come into view. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So continuing our discussion on panel navigators, we've discussed how the carousel allows you to navigate from one panel card to another panel that is displayed inside the navigator. But there are other ways for transitioning from panel to panel inside a navigator, and the tab button style is another popular and common pattern that you see in mobile applications. So in this case, the transition from panel card 1 to panel card 2 would not be done by the user exerting a swipe gesture on panel card 1. Instead, you can see now we've placed buttons in the footer of the panel navigator. These buttons could just as easily have been placed in the header of the panel navigator, and now the buttons control which panel is going to be visible. So currently button 1 is pressed, and therefore panel card 1 is currently being viewed. But if we now go to the next slide, we can see now that when button 2 is pressed, then panel card 2 comes into view. So you can have obviously as many panel cards as you want, and then for each panel card there would be a corresponding button to control the visibility of that particular panel. So the next type of panel that we'd like to discuss is a panel layout. So the panel layout allows you to actually display multiple panels at once. So whereas the panel navigator allows you to transition from one panel to another panel, the panel layout allows you to see, in this case you can see we're viewing two different panels at the same time right now. So when you define a panel layout, you specify the flow of the panels that are contained within it. So in this case here we have a panel layout that contains two panel cards, and the flow has been set to left to right. Therefore panel card 2 is shown to the right of panel card 1. Also, when you define a panel layout, you can specify what the size is of each of the panels, and the size can be specified in either absolute dimensions or relative dimensions. So in this case here you can see that panel card 2 appears to be twice the width of panel card 1, and that was specified using, say, a relative dimension, which means that if the same application was viewed, say, on a phone rather than, say, a tablet, then panel card 1 would still be half the size of panel card 2, but both panels would be smaller because the total available width is less. Now in this case, as I mentioned, the flow is left to right, but panels can also flow from top to bottom. So you can see here that our flow now is going from top to bottom, and in this case the size dimension of panel card 1 and panel card 2 refers to the height of the panels, not the width of the panels, because the width of the panel is automatically set to fill the container. So this panel card 1 has a width that completely fills its container, which of course is panel layout number 1. So in this case the panel layout is quite simple. It just contains a single panel layout with two child panel cards. But panel layouts can be more complex, and a panel layout can contain another panel layout. So in this case here you can see that panel card 2, which we were previously displaying on the right now, has been replaced by another panel layout, which in turn contains panel cards. So now we've created a more complex layout that has panel card 1 on the left and then panel card 2 and 3 on the right above each other. So if we look at this here, we can see that the first layout is flowed from left to right, whereas this layout over here is flowed from top to bottom. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing our discussion now on how panel layouts can be used to create complex layouts. And now let's go and take a look at how this layout over here can be made even richer. So let's go and take a look now at the next layout. And you can see now that what we've done is we've replaced panel card 2 in the previous slide with a panel navigator which contains panel card 3, and then instead of panel card 4 showing over here directly, we've put in a panel navigator over here, which in turn contains panel card 4 and panel card 5. So let's take a look now at what's going to happen when we actually were to display this layout on a mobile device. So initially what we would see is panel card 1, panel card 2 and panel card 3. But panel card 3 is inside a navigator, and this navigator's flow direction has been set to left to right. So now if the user swipes on panel card 3, then panel navigator 2 will come into view. So panel card 3 will move off screen, and panel navigator 2 will move on screen. Now panel navigator 2 contains panel card 4 and panel card 5, and its flow direction has been set to top to bottom. So when panel navigator 2 comes into view after the user swipes card 3 away, then panel card 4 will be initially displayed. But if the user swipes and drags upwards on panel card 4, then panel card 5 will come into view. So this is probably a more complex layout than you might build in a real-world mobile application, but nevertheless it demonstrates the very rich complexity of layouts that you can easily create using panel layouts, panel navigators, and panel cards. So let's take a look now at how this layout over here would actually be represented in the UX component builder if you were to try to build this type of layout in the UX component builder. So you can see here that what we have is the tree control that the UX component builder uses to represent the layout, and at the very top, the outermost level here, we have panel layout 1. So you can see everything here is contained in panel layout 1, and you can see from there, from the first entry to the last entry is panel layout 1. Now inside panel layout 1, the first control that we have is panel card 1. So there's panel card 1, which is the first entry inside the panel layout. So there we have panel card 1 over there. And then the next entry is panel layout 2. So you can see immediately following panel card 1, we have panel layout 2 over here. And its flow direction here is TTB, which is top to bottom. You can see here that panel layout 1 has a flow direction of LTR, which is left to right, which in fact is what we see here. Panel card 1 is to the left of panel layout 2. So now looking at panel layout 2, we can see that inside panel layout 2, the first thing that we have is panel card 2 over there. So there's panel card 2 inside the panel layout. And then the next thing that we have is a navigator. So next to panel card 2, we can see here we have the navigator, and inside this navigator, the first item that we have is panel card 3. So there's panel card 3. And then the next item inside the navigator is in fact another navigator, which is panel navigator 2. So here's panel navigator 2. And panel navigator 2 contains two cards, panel card 4 and panel card 5. So here's panel navigator 2, and then inside panel navigator 2 we have panel card 4 from there to there, and panel card 5 from there to there. So this tree here represents the entire structure of this complex layout. Now obviously we're not showing any of the actual controls that you'd place on each of these panel cards, which would show up here in the tree inside these panel cards over here. But what we've shown is how this very complex layout is represented quite easily and elegantly inside this. So we're continuing our discussion of panels, and we've shown now how this complex layout here would be represented in the UX component builder, in the tree structure here of the UX component. So now let's continue talking about docked panels. So previously the panel layouts that we've shown have shown all of the panels that are inside the panel layout. But in many types of applications, when you have a panel layout, you actually want to hide some of the panels that are in the panel layout, and you want to hide them either explicitly or conditionally. So in this case here, you can see that we have a panel layout that has been flowed from left to right. And inside this panel layout we have two panel cards, but panel card 1 is not currently visible. It's been hidden, and possibly explicitly by setting a property on it, or possibly automatically, and automatically would be in the case where you've set a minimum width for panel card 2 and there isn't sufficient width in the panel layout to accommodate the minimum width of panel card 2. Therefore it has pushed panel card 1 into a hidden state so that it can get more space to display itself. This is typically the case, say, in a for example, on a mobile application, when you change orientation from landscape to portrait, a panel might need to push another panel off the screen and make it invisible so that it has enough room to display itself. So if you look here, panel card 1, as we mentioned, has been hidden, and there's a button now that is displayed in this panel layout header that will control the visibility of panel card 1. So when you click this button, panel card 1 will become visible, and the way in which it becomes visible can be controlled in one of two ways. It can either slide, as you can see here, over panel card 2. So in this case, basically, when panel card 1 became visible, it's obscuring a part of panel card 2. So in this case, the docked panel was slided, if that's the right word, over the visible panels. But another option is to actually push the visible panel off the screen. So if we go to the next slide here, we can see that when panel card 1 became visible, it actually pushed panel card 2 slightly off the screen, so the right edge of panel card 2 is no longer visible. It's been pushed off the screen. Now obviously in this case the flow direction of panel card 1 and panel card 2 has been set to left to right, but if the flow direction had been set to top to bottom, for example, then when panel card 1 was shown and it pushed panel card 2 off the screen, it would be pushing it off the bottom of the screen. So up until now we've been discussing how panels are used in mobile applications, but the fact is that panels are also quite useful in desktop web applications as well. So if we go here to our next slide, we can actually see a screenshot showing the New York Times website, and the reason that I'm showing this here is to show you how this complex page layout here that the New York Times uses could be easily constructed using panels. So if we look at the New York Times website here, we can see that the page can be deconstructed into different sections, each of which I've shaded here using different colors. So at the top of the screen in the reddish color, we can see the header or the masthead, which is the full width of the page. Then on the left hand side, shaded blue, we have a navigation section. Then in the green, we have in the center here, we have the actual content of the page. So this is where the main content page is displayed. And then on the right hand side in yellow, we have another navigation section which also remains on the page as the content section is changed. So we're continuing our discussion of panel navigators, panel layouts, and panel cards. And we're talking now about how a complex layout like the New York Times layout can be constructed using panel layouts and panel cards. So you can see here that what we have is a panel layout that has been flowed from top to bottom, and then inside the panel layout we have a panel card which represents the header section of the New York Times page. So this panel card stretches the full width of the page. Then after the panel card we have another panel layout which has been flowed from left to right, and this panel layout contains 3 panel cards, a left hand side navigation section, a center main content section, and then the right navigation section. and then the width of this the width of each of these panels can be set to a fixed size so that they fill up the panel layout. And then after this panel layout, we have another panel card which represents the footer of the page, and this too is the full width of the page. Now, if we were to display this layout in a browser, the page would be left justified on the screen, but the New York Times is actually centered on the screen. So let's go now and take a look at how that layout shown in the previous slide could be modified so that the actual content page is horizontally centered in the screen. And we do that by simply adding the entire layout into another panel layout with an empty panel card on the left and an empty panel card on the right, and then the actual complex structure, which was is now in a panel layout in the center. So we have a left to right flow and then the panel layout in the center, and this panel on the left and this panel on the right have flexible width sets so that the center panel layout 2 is always going to be in the center of the page, regardless of the size of the browser window. So as you resize the browser window, the center panel layout 2 will remain centered on the screen. So now let's go and take a look at a real-world mobile app. Let's take a look here at the iPhone stocks application and deconstruct this app into panels so that we can see how this app could be built using the UX component builder in Alpha 5. So when we look at the screen over here, what we actually see is a panel layout over here, and then inside the panel layout we see a panel card, which is the list part that I'm pointing to over here, which looks like it's been set to about 2/3 of the width of the page. And then underneath that we have a navigator which looks like it's being set to about 1/3 of the page. So the first screen represents the initial view of the stocks application, and then when the user performs a swipe gesture on this chart at the bottom, then this list comes into view. So you can see that this section that contains the chart is actually a navigator, and the first card in the navigator is a chart, and then the second card in this navigator is a list. So this phone application here can be deconstructed into panels using the following structure over here. So we have a panel layout which represents the entire page. Then inside the panel layout we have a panel card, and inside that panel card we have a list. So this list of prices over here represents the list control. Then we have a panel navigator, and inside the panel navigator we have a panel card which contains the chart, and then the next item in the panel navigator is another panel card which contains this list over here. So what we've shown over here is how a typical mobile application that you might see on your iPhone is deconstructed into panel cards, panel navigators, and panel layouts. Thanks very much for watching this tutorial.